The trumpet of war echoed once more across Israel. Smoke rose from the hills of Gilgal. Fear stirred in every village. Yet the people shouted one named Saul, their king, their hope. He had led them to battle, sword gleaming, his height above all heads. And the Lord gave them victory, or so it seemed. But beneath the cheers, the silence of obedience cracked. Samuel had said,
"Wait 7 days. I will come. I will offer the sacrifice."
7 days passed, but no prophet came. The soldiers grew restless. Some fled, some doubted. Saul paced, eyes darting. Trust gave way to tremble. Faith bent into fear. Then he did the unthinkable. The king took the place of the priest. He built the altar. He called for fire. He offered the burnt sacrifice with hands that were never called to carry the holy. And just as the smoke rose, Samuel arrived. Too late to stop the act, but right on time to witness the heart.
"What have you done?"
The people were scattering. You did not come. The Philistines were near. I had to seek the Lord.
You have acted foolishly.
"You have not kept the command of the Lord your God. If you had, he would have established your kingdom forever.
Pause!
But now your kingdom shall not endure."
The fire on the altar flickered, but it was not warm, it was revealed. Samuel's cloak billowed as he turned away. Saul stood alone, surrounded by men, but cut off from God. The sound of the sacrifice faded. What remained was a crack in the crown, invisible to men, but blazing in the eyes of heaven. And though Saul still held the sword, and still heard the chants of victory, but something eternal had slipped through his fingers. The throne would remain, but the favor was already walking away. The smoke still clung to Saul's fingers. The altar still glowed with fading flame. But heaven had already turned away. Samuel's words echoed in the air, heavier than steel, colder than silence.
"Your kingdom shall not endure."
The soldiers around them froze, not in reverence, but confusion. They had seen a king offer a sacrifice. They had seen victory, but they did not see what Samuel saw. He saw a heart that rushed ahead of God, a man who feared men more than he feared the Lord, a king who chose appearance over obedience. Samuel stepped forward, not as an old friend, not as a priest, but as the voice of judgment. His eyes bore into Saul, not with rage, but with the weight of rejected mercy. And then he spoke the final blow.
"The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and he has appointed him ruler over his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command."
A pause. The crown on Saul's head suddenly felt heavier, and yet no one could see it slipping.
I have sinned, but honor me now before the people.
"I cannot honor what heaven has rejected."
Saul reached for Samuel's robe. One the fabric tore. It was just cloth, but it sounded like thunder. Samuel turned, holding the torn hem. He looked at it, then at Saul.
"The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to one better than you."
Then he walked away, not out of anger, but because the voice of God had spoken and the prophet had nothing more to add. The Lord gave a command. Strike Amalek, destroy all, leave nothing, spare no life. It was not a suggestion, not a strategy. It was a holy judgment. But Saul obeyed halfway. He marched with fury. He conquered. He triumphed. And then he compromised. He spared King Agag. He kept the best of the sheep and cattle. He told himself it was for sacrifice. But heaven saw through the smoke. God spoke to Samuel that night. not in thunder, not in vision, but in grief. I regret that I made Saul king. He has turned back from following me, and has not carried out my commands. Samuel wept until morning. Then he rose, not as a friend, not as a judge, but as the bearer of divine rejection. He came to Gilgal and found Saul, smiling.
Blessed be you to the Lord. I have performed the command of the Lord.
But Samuel's face was stone, and the wind carried a sound behind them bleating. A moo, a lie.
What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears, and the lowing of oxen that I hear?
They, the people, spared the best to sacrifice to the Lord your God.
Stop. When you were small in your own eyes, were you not made king? And now you have rejected the word of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord has rejected you from being king.
Saul collapsed to his knees, not in repentance, but in desperation.
I have sinned. Please honor me before the people of.
Samuel turned to go, but Saul clung to his robe again, and again it tore. The same tear, the same symbol, but this time final. Samuel turned back only once to finish what Saul refused. He called for egg, and with his own sword, he completed the command. Before he left Gilgal and never saw Saul again. Agag stood chained, not in fear, but in arrogance. His robes were torn, but his ride remained. His kingdom lost, but his smirk lingered. He looked at Samuel, an old prophet, in dusty robes, and whispered,
Surely the bitterness of death is past.
But Samuel did not blink. Behind them, Saul turned away. The man who should have obeyed had stepped back, and so the prophet stepped forward, not with rage, not with revenge, but with righteousness.
As your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women.
The sword rose, heaven held its breath, and the last king of Amalek fell, not by the hand of a warrior, but by the hand of a prophet. The floor was stained with justice. The silence screamed obedience.
To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king.
The sword fell still. Samuel handed it back, not to Saul, but to a Levite, a priest, someone who knew the weight of the holy. He did not look back. He did not bless. He did not speak again. He left Gilgal by his robe torn, his heart heavier than before, and his eyes never saw Saul again. But heaven had seen, and somewhere in Bethlehem, a shepherd boy turned his harp unaware that a crown was already looking for his head. Gilgal was quiet. The sun had long set, but no stars dared shine. The campfire crackled, but gave no warmth. The king sat in his tent, silent. The prophet stood at the edge ready to leave, but not yet gone. No words were exchanged. No blessings. No farewell embrace. Saul looked at Samuel and hoped for a change, a softening, a final act of grace. But Samuel's face was stone, not from anger, not from hatred, but from sorrow that had no words left to give. Once this man had anointed Saul with oil. Once he had called him the desire of Israel. No, he turned to go, and he would never return, for the Lord had spoken. And so two men, once joined by purpose, now walked in opposite directions. One toward a fading throne, one toward the heart of God.
Forgive me.
The Lord has torn the kingdom from you, and he has given it to one better.
The next morning, dew rested on the earth, but nothing could cool the heat between them. Samuel left Gilgal. He returned to Ramah to pray, to silence, to wait. Saul returned to Gibeah to soldiers, to thrones, to echoes of a crown that no longer held weight. And they would never meet again. Not until death. Not until a spirit rose in the night, but that is another story. For now, the curtain fell, and the stage waited for a shepherd, for a harp, for a king after God's own heart.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of faith. If you believe these Bible stories can touch hearts, please leave a kind comment, and share this video with your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to Bible Adventures, where we bring God's Word to life through epic, heartfelt animations for kids and families alike. May you and your family always walk in God's blessings and peace.